we're going to welcome up our panellists and we're going to talk about women and girls. So, strategies to welcome, engage, and retain women and girls in sport. I'm going to introduce our wonderful panellists here. So, we have Dr. Adele, Pavlidis. People always mess up my last name. It's Sabeljak and it's very phonetic. And everyone's like, how do you say it? I'm like, give it a go. And I didn't take my own advice saying your name, so I'm sorry. So Adele is a senior lecturer in sociology and with Griffith University's School of Humanities, Language and Social Sciences, and has published widely on a range of socio-cultural issues in sport and leisure with a focus on gender and power relations. Currently, her work focuses on sport as a key site of change in Australian society and important context for changing and challenging attitudes towards women. Now, I follow you on social media and I always see you posting down at the skate park, getting women and girls involved in skateboarding, which I think is super, super duper cool. Sorry, my face isn't recognised. Courtney Fakwande, did I say that?
Wendy. Yeah.
Perfect. So Courtney is a proud Butchulla and Gubbi Gubbi woman from the Wide Bay and Sunshine Coast region in Queensland. Courtney has been involved in many community engagement roles in sport and is currently the General Manager of First Nations Football of Football Australia, with previous work with Queer Sport Alliance and Cricket Australia. Her work and advocacy for marginalised groups in community sport also earned her nominations as Out Role Model of the Year at 2021 Australian Pride in Sports Awards and winner of the Changemaker of the Year. Of the Out of Australia 30 Under 30 Awards in 2020. Courtney's passion and expertise lay in diversity, equity and social justice. Graduating in May 2023, Courtney is also part of the inaugural cohort to be awarded a Master of Indigenous Business Leadership at Monash University. Courtney has recently awarded a panel position with FIFA All Women's First Nations Culture Advisory Panel for the Football Women's World Cup in 2023. Courtney produces an extensive high-level body of work converting diverse sports and voices for publications on Siren Sport. Courtney is also on the board of Women's Coaching Association and Queer Sport Alliance. Wonderful. So good.
I didn't write that, by the way.
Love it. And Sunny Jaswell? Sonata?
Yes.
Yep, perfect. Melds her background in sociology and her passion for sport to explore and harness the different socio-cultural patterns that impact our sport and recreational industry. Sunny moved from India to Australia in 2015, completing her postgraduate degree in sport management at Deakin University and is currently the Women and Girls Lead for Queensland Tennis Australia. She was also a finalist this year, the India-Australian Business and Community Alliance Young Professional of the Year Award. Can we just get a round of applause for our incredible panellists? I think that's unreal. So I might start with you, Adele. What initiatives are you seeing across the sport and rec industry that we can create the right conditions for women and girls to feel welcomed in sport?
Firstly, thank you for having me. It's been really great to listen to everybody else and also think about how in every topic we could be talking about gendered embodiment, issues around racism and gender, regardless of the topic. Even in technology, we know that AI has biases. When you type into Google who is, the champion team in whatever, it will just give you the men's team and it will ignore the results for the women. So we do have this inherent bias, particularly in sport, which was originally a space for men to prove their masculinity. That's why we originally had sport. So there's a lot to overcome. And so I wanted to just start with that, because the question of what initiatives am I seeing? I think I'm seeing so much. There's so much goodwill, so much energy. Having us on a panel today is wonderful. All the funding that's going into girls and women in sport, little things even like changing uniforms, being more sensitive to what people want to wear, being willing to change our language around, some people are now talking about athletes in and around women's sport rather than talking about women's sport, which I think is a good start. But all those little things are still just chipping away, and what is really needed is a major cultural shift in how we value women within the sports system. When you look at the statistics and who's involved in club sports in particular, girls and women are really not represented as much. There are still many sport clubs who maybe they've never had a woman as president, for example. Like, some people might say, oh, well, maybe a woman never wanted to do that, but I would say that maybe the conditions were not supportive of her taking up that role, that we still have a particular view of what is a gender norm, like what is appropriate for a woman, what is appropriate for a man. Those things, they persist. So even though I'm seeing lots of wonderful initiatives, and I did my PhD about roller derby, which I think is a great example of a sport that was able to attract women, many of whom had never really played organised sport before. So there's a lot to learn from these new kind of sports that are presenting something different in the sporting landscape. But in saying that, there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Sunny, I'll go over to you now. Adding on to what Adele was talking about, those right conditions for women and girls to be involved in sport, what are you seeing in tennis or in your industry that is adding to those environments?
I think the recent few years, there's definitely been, with funding, with what Adele was saying, funding, whether that's federal, state, or even from organizations itself, this allowing for opportunities. So we're looking at programs that are like leadership programs. So we're looking at networking opportunities, we're looking at mentoring opportunities, and this is all part of the Tennis Australia Women and Girls Plan that we're rolling out, and also the Tennis Queensland Gender Equity Plan. I think it's a step forward that organizations, we have a strategy and we have a plan, but there's a dedicated plan to gender equity, and that there is that, at least on paper, to start off with and as Adele was saying, that there are a lot more cultural and social barriers that we need to jump over to, reach that end goal. But in saying that, like, thank you. All of the programs that we're seeing, I think there's one thing in common, is that it's actually bringing women together. And I feel like that is creating a good start to creating that right condition for women, because and I know we've said this so many times and we keep saying it, but I will say it again, but you can't do what you can't see approach. Like, when we're getting in young women to actually be a part of a networking event where they're senior coaches or female coaches, and they're seeing that, oh my gosh, there's something apart from playing competitively on the court or on the field. Like, there are other options in sport that I can be a part of, and that in itself is the first step to empower them. So yeah, I think that the community of coming together is absolutely important, and most of the initiatives that are being rolled out, not just in tennis but by other organizations, is great work being done by football, focusing on bringing women into an environment where they feel safe and where they feel welcome.
Yeah, it's so crucial, isn't it? I think reflecting on my career, and a lot of my career, I've been in women's team and in men's team, and now wheelchair rugby. It's a mixed gender team. We have athletes who identify as non-binary. I think it is one of the most inclusive sports going around, and we want to create a space where everybody is psychologically safe. And when we have people in those positions who don't allow that, it actually affects so much more than what is happening. It is your performance, it's your home life, it's everything around you. So having that sense of belonging is massive. And I've seen it done pretty poorly, and I've seen it done really well. And those teams that I've been around that do it really well, you just want to champion that. You just want to get it all up and tied in a little, package and give it to everybody. So, Courtney, going on to you, I just want to extend on that question from you and your experience in football. What are the conditions happening? What are we seeing in football that are allowing, women and girls in our space to feel welcomed?
I think firstly a specific initiative and program to point to is a women and non-binary internship in media that has been part of a legacy program that has been established by Football Australia to support the ongoing legacy of what the FIFA Women's World Cup is to bring. And that was something that I think I've seen that's a little bit different to what's been happening much around sporting landscapes in the lead up to major tournaments. And that's a huge piece that I think will empower and uplift a lot of female voices, particularly as we transcend after the tournament. It's not just one and done. It's an ongoing journey, and like you said earlier, if you can't see it, you can't be it. But you also have to be there, and that's a more important thing, and not just a one-off splash in the pan, but having an active job actually in media. If that's what you want to do, we should be able to provide the pathways for that. I wanted to touch on some stuff you guys were both saying before about belonging, and for women's sports to have the condition to thrive, it's, again, ensuring that we're viewing it as a holistic sport opportunity. So media, writing, participating, the bus driver, whatever it is as part of our sports, it's imperative that we don't leave any women behind. And that is called communities, it's First Nations, it's women who, people that women identifying people, trans women, non-binary people. We can't leave anyone behind as part of these conversations now. It's 2023. And we have evolved so much as a landscape in a field. And as we start to turn our focus more on women's sport, that we can't continue to progress without everyone else as part of that. So it's really important that we transform our thinking with that as well.
With that, how can we change, I guess, or influence the current landscape into creating more opportunities and engagement for, I would say, more community level and then building up to high performance?
Yeah, I could yarn about this for ages, but we'll start firstly, I think we all have a role to play in how we talk about sport, how we value sport. What is sport? We were talking about this before. It's not all just, green and gold medals. No offense to Nat, who's a legend. She's not here. Good. But it isn't. Sometimes, even for me personally, I'm 27. I've just kind of come back from retiring from basketball, and 6 years on, you definitely feel it in your body, and probably why I look disgusting right now. But sorry. But truly, just participating, be a part of a team environment, it just does wonders for everything in your life. And I think we all play a role in giving that. Everyone in this room plays a role in giving that to somebody, whether it be that we're, ensuring that we're reviewing the policies in our law role within sport, or working in finance, or being a coach. It's really imperative that we, know that it's not all about gold medal. It's very important to establish role models, but they also have to be really good people. I think we're expecting more of our role models or athletes, and we aspire to be more like really good people rather than good performers now. And I think that's the generational change that we're seeing for a lot of our demographics. And there's statistics behind that. I can't tell you what they are, but they're definitely there. Academic could probably point us to some of those, but it's really true that the narrative that we share in sport, what we stand for, what those policies and procedures that are behind that work to protect and champion those who haven't been traditionally involved in the game, and ensuring that we approach things with an equitable lens. Noting just because we have a girls program doesn't mean that it's effective, and doesn't mean that we tick that box, and we've got to stop putting rubber stamps on things and start doing things right. So how do we do that? I mean, if it was up to me, we'd shut the whole system down, start it again. And what we're finding is we across national sports and states, as you guys know, is that there's a great emphasis on diversity and inclusion, and that is awesome. The inclusion part, I think, kind of highlights the fact that sport right now isn't necessarily for everyone, and we hold into this kind of inclusion, we're including you, but it's almost kind of counterintuitive. We should be breaking down all of those exclusion barriers that our sports already have, start again, and that should be kind of representative, not in just our on-field success, the teams that we put on the field, but also who's in the change rooms, who's calling the plays, who's managing the teams, who's doing admin, who's on the board. It's all really, really, really important. And for us, I think it's also looking at the female identifying athlete or athletes in general, about their holistic, long-term, relationship with sport. And we have to show that there's more to the sport than just playing on the field. And I think we can change, really impact people's lives and change things for the better if we approach this from an industry lens as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's incredible. Yeah, round of applause. Oh. I think it was really interesting how you were saying, women and identifying women on boards and in the group. If you can't be, you can't see it. So if you're running an organisation and the people at the top are, developing these policies and procedures, if you don't have these people who you're making these decisions about there with you along the journey, you're not gonna get it right. And so often it's like, we're almost there, but we could be doing better. And Adele, talking about getting it right, what can we do to make women and girls feel empowered and feel have that belonging in sport, in community, high performance, whatever their journey may be? What can we do to encourage that?
I think everything that Courtney was saying was amazing, having those policies in place, training all our different staff and volunteers and coaches about inclusion, about racism, about sexism, about what sport is, that it is a site of belonging, it's a space of well-being. I think that we would all, Kieran Perkins said that, we can't say that, sport's good for our health, but, there are so many benefits in terms of social inclusion and belonging that many people are left out of because, for whatever reason, whether they're not athletic enough or they don't have the right attitude. So, in my research, it was interesting because I looked at the dynamics of inclusion and exclusion in roller derby, and, there was bullying going on even between women. So it's not just about women, it's about all of us together making a difference, that men can be amazing coaches of women's teams and women can be amazing coaches of men's teams. And it's about moving beyond binaries, to be honest. That's at the heart of it. It's not about winning and losing. It's along this continuum. It's not about men and women. It's about the whole gamut of experience, It's weird. It's like, what is a womanly quality? There is nothing specific to being a woman that a man can't also be, that we might not. I want my sons to be kind, caring, nurturing, and I want the experience to be strong. I want to be aggressive sometimes when I play sport. Like, we all can own all of these qualities. So for me, it's about troubling that binary. And even in sport, that binary between art and sport, for example, that, you can be involved in sport and be a writer. You can write poetry about sport and you could be in your club. And how cool would that be to have a sport club that has like resident poetry workshops or something, just ways to move away from this. It's just about competition. It's just about organising competitions. It's about trying to be the best. It's not. At the end of the day, when we look at what sport is about, it is about belonging. It is about having a place where you feel safe and where there are people there that you can rely on. Yeah, it's about so much more.
Yeah, absolutely. Sunny. With record attendance, we've got huge commercial interest in elite female sport and women's sport. What can we do to generate fan engagement at a community level?
Yeah, how good is that? When I think of it, like with stadiums packed and people go and watch like women's sport and tickets selling out in 48 hours for the first game of the FIFA World Cup. I mean, it's just so exciting. And Australia set up in the next decade to host around 16 mega events. So I think as an industry, we have we can make a significant impact to ensuring that there's that enthusiasm and engagement at the community level over the next 10 years. And it totally comes down to for me, I think like the messaging we send out to young women and young girls. And going back to the last panel, like with the discussion around technology and how can we use technology, whether that's media or organizations going out through socials and communications about yes, it's important for young women and young girls to see other women perform at a high performance level and to feel like they can be there too. But I think there's also an understanding that as an industry we need that the visibility that women and girls actually may demand for could be totally different, and it could be a demand for seeing athletes and their experiences that are actually grounded in reality. Like, the challenge of how they've got there. Like, that's how people relate. Like, you look at, there's such a big gap with how media portrays, like, any athlete, professional athlete, and for the younger girls with the programs that we are doing at the moment, I think it's hard to keep them engaged and excited and really keep them back in the club, because if they're not, the next Ash Barty on the court, which all of us would love to be. I used to play, and honestly, I think we would have all enjoyed that. But I think it's important for them to know that there are options for them. Like, that's the kind of visibility they need more than, and they don't even know that that option is out there. So I think, the next 10 years would be crucial, like with the way I see it, with all these amazing mega events coming up and all these, the stadiums filling up. But what's the information we're bringing out there? And again, like by the end of it, if you're making women feel like, goes back to the conversation of belonging, goes back to the conversation of feeling supported and knowing what options they have out there apart from that excitement that they feel there, and you want to generate that camaraderie and take it down into the communities. I mean, I haven't even been to Manchester in my life, but I'm like a Manchester United fan. So if we can bring that sense of pride in your community clubs, like, I light up when I watch a game, and honestly, like, we need to ask ourselves that if we have that fan engagement at that level, like, how can we generate that by doing the right things and creating the right community and having that in the grassroots? So,
Cool. I just wanted to add to that as well. A major part of success for, I think, unengaged communities, and I'll apply a First Nations lens, we use the phrase a lot of not about us without us. Often we've had years, decades of people establishing programs or policies without having the input of First Nations people, and more often than not it's more counterproductive than it is helpful, but it's still a very similar kind of theme to apply in the context of women. Like, I've been in community sport offices where the where the female participation strategy is getting put together by 3 blokes, and you're like, awesome, they've got daughters and they understand it, but they also don't at the same time. And there's still a lot more lived experience that we need to add to our program development and policy development. And then that being said, the ability to put something together that, a lot of women have been a part of, they'll own it, they'll take it, they'll grow it, they'll just transform it. And if the sporting environment was in a position where we were doing great, we wouldn't be having these conversations, right? So clearly we haven't had enough, women's input in the development of women's programs all the way through to elite. But shameless plug as well, speaking of participation and surveys, I'm not sure if it was mentioned this morning in Kieran's speech, but the Australian Sports Commission participation strategy is getting built at the moment in the country, and the survey is open right now. I know obviously there's a lot of sector representatives here that probably have already provided some feedback to the Australian Sports Commission often, but if you want to have your say, it's really important that we get online and put it there, because we can't complain about it if we didn't actually provide the advice that we all very much have. And I think there's probably a lot of really rich knowledge in the room here today. So I encourage you, when you get a second.
Where do we find that?
Online.
The ASC website?
The ASC website, yeah.
Perfect.
It's floating around on social media as well.
I just wanted to add to what you were saying. So I've just started a new project federally funded by the Australian Research Commission, and it's called Outsiders in Sport, co-creating an inclusive sport participation legacy for mega sport events. So it's a 3-year project, and we're looking at girls, women and non-binary people from various different communities, so cold backgrounds, Indigenous, women with experience of disability, so that we don't just, when we talk about women and girls, we're not just talking about able-bodied white women who have a higher incomes. Like, we want women with lower incomes. So we'll be talking to them and hopefully working with them over the 3 years to think about how they would want to connect. You know, these are people who are not involved in sport, for whom the Olympics and Paralympics don't mean that much. And I want to know, how can we help them connect to these sporting experiences in meaningful ways?
I think we might have time for a question from the audience, if we have any brewing. Yes, Autumn. Oh, hold on, one up there, yep.
Am I cutting in on someone?
No, go for it.
Hi everyone, Carol, I've met you. Just having a conversation with Alison, 1980s I was advocating for gender equality in sport, and it's been a really long journey, and I'm sitting here saying to Alison, at what point do we not need to have a panel on women in sport? My dream would be that we don't need to single it out, but I'd be interested for all of you to hear from you. Do you think, is that 10 years from now, 5 years, when will we stop singling this out, because we've kind of reached that point where it is what it is and we're doing what we need to do and we're part of the sporting landscape? And can I just say, what happened today? We've had
11 female speakers, 2 female hosts and 3 male.
Woohoo! I agree. Yeah. That needs a clap. That is amazing.
And thanks to Tim for organising a wonderfully inclusive and diverse event. It's really clear how purposeful that's been, because I know without having that at the forefront of people's minds, that wouldn't have been what happened. And I mean, just thinking about all the research about when we're going to reach pay equity as a society, I think, is it like 100 and something years or something like that? So I think there's still quite a long way to go in terms of how we value women and girls, because historically women and girls have been objects while men have been the subject. So shifting that, it just takes a long time, because there are still men today that believe that women are the objects, that they should be the child bearers and the ones that are at home, and that they shouldn't have the same opportunities. So we do have a long way to go, but I love that new respect ad that's been going on, and the differences that we can all make in schools and everywhere, and that it's not pie. That idea that we can communicate to, the men and boys in our life, that by women getting equality, they're not going to lose, that we're all going to gain from this.
Completely. I think, short and simple, we'll probably stop having to have these conversations when we have, an equal or an equitable amount of women on our boards and as CEOs. I think, how many sporting organisations have CEOs that are women? Not many, if any. 10. Amazing. that is actually quite great.
Just want to add, I think it's like the sooner everyone kind of jumps on board and realize that, you know, it's just business as usual. Like, this is not something that should need like an additional workforce to do it. And if it's like, you know, if that's a priority as much as facilities, strategy, you know, it's part of and embedded in your system of like what governance looks like, what policies looks like, what frameworks, and what Adele was saying. I think, I mean, that would be the biggest legacy working in this field that we can leave behind, that you actually don't need someone in the next 10 years. So, Carol, yeah, we would love that. But I think it's a lot more work that all of us need to do as the sporting industry, and really capitalize on the next 10 years to see that we're getting the right message out.
Yeah, absolutely. Autumn.
Thank you. I just wanted to recall a comment that was made on the last panel about e-sport and there being no gender divide, which I think is a bit of a big call, because what we know about these, you know, major disruptors, you know, when we think about the internet, for instance, I think that was supposed to be, you know, an equalizer in that, you know, anyone could access information. And when we think about COVID, and I'm sorry, to Adele's point, you know, the internet, the algorithms are quite biased, so that didn't eventuate. And then when we think about COVID and the disproportionate disadvantage for women, of all of the really exciting things that we talked about today, where's the risk? Where's the risk that, I mean, that you all see going forward that we have to keep our eye on as it relates to not continuing to perpetuate the status quo as it relates to women in sport?
I'm happy to go first. Yeah, I think things to be really risky of is our kind of school to elite sport pathway. If you don't have access to a good school, you're most likely not going to be able to be afforded all of the extra opportunities to have those extra training sessions, have the old girls network, be part of these, you know, elite squads from an early age that you're getting picked up quite early from, you know, with talent and stuff. Though that is something that has, you know, been a major backbone in the success of a lot of sport across the country, it is something that is quite unfair for those who don't have that access. And if sporting bodies don't keep up with that kind of demand or that growth, I think what we'll find with women's sport is it'll start to become you can play competitively or play. Will be given, you know, as many opportunities as you can to thrive professionally as a professional athlete, because you've had access to all of these things, and that's usually established because of your family's financial situation. Additionally, I think as part of that creates a different kind of culture, which we're seeing in some of the not so great clubs and communities, particularly in more male-dominated sports. And I think another risk for in that space as well is just the diversity element of that, is that we'll start to see, which is great, more women in sport, but we'll find that it's only kind of one flavour or one kind of visually, one kind of girl that has that access. So it's something that I think is a risk, but something that I think the nature of women's sport has kind of created this beautiful culture and environment where everyone is welcome and does belong to the game. So hopefully that continues to progress, but we need to keep up from a sporting programmatic level, that all girls have access, all women and girls have access to sport, and ensuring that socioeconomic barrier isn't present as part of that.
I just wanted to add with the technology, so making sure that conversation about equity and gender is included when we're talking about technology, but also something I wanted to mention that you and I were talking about earlier around violence against women. So we know that 1 in 3 women have been subject to physical or sexual violence from the age of 15. So, and by somebody they know. So that could be a coach or somebody in a sports club, a position in authority, and that, you know, there would be many women in this room who have had that experience. So making sure that we keep that sport is not separate to society, that it's not hallowed ground where none of these bad things happen. Sport is as much, I guess, a cause as a cure to many of society's ills. So I feel like we need to keep at that forefront that sport, it's not everything, it's not nothing. You know, I just think that nowadays we're all watching, you know, Ted Lasso is an amazing vision of kind of holistic coaching, and that idea that sport is life, you know, and we can all relate to that, but it's not always a safe space. So.
And women with a disability are at
Twice that risk.
twice that risk.
Yeah.
So yeah, just being around, being really conscious of that. Well, I just thank you all so much for being a part of our panel. Can we give them a huge, huge, huge round of applause?